Hey guys, Tapping here. It's been a while since I've made a... Oh, right! You're here because you're interested in using your VR headset with the index controllers, or any other Steam VR track device, such as Vive wands or Vive trackers, for instance. So this video is going to be part one of a two-part video. In this video, I'm going to be doing a tutorial, so timestamps will be here if you want to just skip straight to the tutorial. And then in my next video, I'm going to be doing a review of how well this system works, maybe some of the quirks, etc. If you want to see that next video, be sure to subscribe, so you can actually catch it. And, just as a quick little motivation for all of this is, I really wanted to get out that review video. That was my main purpose. But I realized, as I was thinking about all of the aspects of the review, that it's kind of important that people understand how it works. And so I kind of wanted to make a quick tutorial video, and then ended up just kind of, becoming its own video, hence this video. So yeah, that's what this video is going to be for. It's going to be informative so that you know how things are working and just lead you to more resources if you want to learn more. So there'll be lots of links in the description for various resources, such as a longer, more in-depth tutorial, as well as the text version of this tutorial, which was made by Pumpkin Spice Truck Nuts. So definitely check out the text version if you're interested in that. Otherwise, yeah, let's get started with how this is all working. Let's get started with the equipment that you will need. First, you will need a VR headset. Hopefully that's obvious, but I actually do want to elaborate on this just a little bit. If you have a Windows Mixed Reality headset or an Oculus headset, any one of them, you can do this. And if you're using a Vive or an Index or any other Steam VR headset, then this is not the tutorial for you. You'll just want to do normal operating instructions for those. For this tutorial, I will be going with a Reverb G2. The other thing you'll need are base stations. So the base stations will enable you to track the controllers. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but you can use 1.0 or 2.0 base stations. You're going to have to do your own research into, how many base stations you might want to use if you're using 2.0 base stations, for example. Just one of the important aspects is that 2.0 base stations are only compatible with 2.0 devices. If you buy 2.0 base stations, you're kind of locked into the 2.0 ecosystem. You have to use things like index controllers, for example. You can't use Vive ones. For this tutorial, I'll be using two 2.0 base stations. And then you'll also need the controllers themselves. Everybody knows them. Everybody likes them. The index controllers. You don't have to use index controllers for this, actually. So you can use any Steam VR track device. Just substitute it in here for whatever you want to use. Again, just keep in mind the compatibility between this and your base stations. What you'll also need are the tracking dongles. Normally, with a Steam VR headset, you would not need these, but you need these in order for the controllers to communicate with the PC. So the ones I have here are from Virtual Builds. You can also get them from Tundra Labs. You can also flash Steam controller dongles. I'm sure there's other sources of these too. And you can also use a headset itself. So if you're using an old Vive, for example, or if you're upgrading from a Vive, you can actually use that headset as the dongles itself. There's two dongles built into the headset. Those are all the things that you absolutely need, but I have some other recommended items. So these ones here, this is just a extension cable, USB 2.0 extension cable. It's useful because then you can get your dongles closer to the middle of the play space and more separated from each other. And then also, surprisingly not required, but again, highly recommend, is that the controller itself from your headset. So for example, here, the Reverb G2 controller I will be using for the calibration. You don't have to, actually, so you can just use the headset itself to do calibration. But I find it much more convenient to use the controller, so that's what I recommend if you have it. Now for step 1, or step 0, I guess I should say, is to grab your G2, Quest, or whatever device you're going to use and check your tracking. I know you might be rolling your eyes at me, but it's super important that you do not have tracking issues now. Otherwise, it's going to be a disaster later. So, just walk across your play space, check the environment move smoothly, consistently. You can see here that I'm checking my controller tracking too, but that's not nearly as critical as the headset tracking. So that's what we really want to make sure is good. Otherwise, you don't need to go too crazy. You just want to make sure everything's working before you get started. So now for actual step 1, we're going to set up our lighthouses. I'm not going to go into too much detail here. Basically, you're just going to set them up the way you would normally set them up for a Vive or an Index. They're only connected via power, and the basic idea is that you're going to have them on opposite ends of your play space, generally higher up and pointing slightly downward. And this is more important for 1.0 base stations to be high up so that they can see each other. 2.0s don't necessarily need to see each other. One small additional thing I want to mention is that the channels of your base stations do matter. So if you're using just one 1.0 base station, it needs to be on channel A. If you're using two 1.0 base stations, they need to be channels B and C. And if you're using 2.0 lighthouses, then you need to make sure that they are on different channels. You can check this later once the setup is done, but the way you're going to be able to change channels on your 2.0 base stations will actually be from the back side of the base station. You can push basically a little reset switch, and that'll increment the channel. The reason I wanted to bring it up in this tutorial is because this information will be a little bit harder to find on a typical Vive or Index setup. Anyway, long story short, just make sure the channels are different for 2.0 base stations, and you should be good to go. Step 2 will be to download the software that we'll need. So first, you're going to want to make sure you close out of everything. So make sure you close out of Steam VR. Make sure you close out of Windows Mixed Reality. So make sure everything's shut down. And make sure you close out of Steam itself. And this is the software that we're going to need. It's OpenVR Space Calibrator. So go to this site. A link will be in the description. And what you'll do is just click on this exe file and go ahead and download that to wherever you want. And then you'll run it. So wherever you downloaded it to, just double click it and you'll run it. And you might see a pop-up like this. If that's the case, just click on more info and then run anyway. For me, it's already installed, but I'll show you the installation anyway. So you just click I agree here and it installs. And that's it. If later down the line you find that the software didn't install correctly, you may need to rerun the installation. Make sure you close completely out of Steam, so go to the taskbar, Steam icon, right-click, exit out of Steam completely, and try running the installation again. It's just a quick troubleshooting tip. For step 3, we want to pair our controllers. So plug in one of the dongles into a USB 2 port. USB 3 can have interference issues. And then grab your Index controller and go ahead and turn it on. Jump into Steam VR, and from the menu, go to Devices and Pair Controller. Then you'll click on Index controller, and then to pair it, you will just push your System button and the B button at the same time and pair the controller. So the light should blink blue on your controller and then turn green when it's connected. And then we just want to repeat the process again for the other controller. So press OK, and then turn off your first controller. And then we're going to make sure that each controller is connected independently to each dongle. So we're going to unplug the first dongle and plug in the second dongle into another USB 2 port. And then go ahead and do what we did last time. So go into Devices, Pair Controller, click on Index controller, and yeah, just follow the same steps. So turn on your controller and push B and the System button at the same time and pair that controller. And that's it. So just push done again. And to set up for the next step, make sure both of your Index controllers are off and make sure your dongles are both plugged into their respective ports. Our final step, step 4, is to actually do the calibration. Go into Steam VR just like you would normally, but I recommend just using one G2 controller, and I'll explain that in a minute. So once we're in Steam VR, we'll open the Steam menu, and now there should be an overlay for OpenVR Space Calibrator. It'll be right here in the bottom part of the menu. If you don't see an icon for it right away, click the 3 dots and look for software called SpaceCal. So go ahead and click that, and this menu should pop up. Now let's go ahead and grab our Index controller, and I recommend choosing the Index controller that is the opposite hand to the G2 controller that you want to use. So I recommend this because Steam VR has to decide which controllers are dominant. So if you do this with a right G2 controller, for example, and a left index controller, then Steam VR won't have to choose one to be like your dominant one for the menus and stuff. Now that your index controller is on, you'll see that it's not with you here, but if you look around, you can actually wave it around like I am here, and you can see that the controller is way off in the distance. And that is because this is the difference between our play spaces is what you're seeing. So in the Space Calibrator software, you're going to see a reference space and a target space. If you're using a Windows Mixed Reality headset, then select holographic for your reference space. If you're using an Oculus headset, then use Oculus as your reference space. And your target space will be Lighthouse. Then you will need to select your devices to use for the calibration, one from each space. So in this case, I selected my Windows Mixed Reality controller, which was the Windows MR, bunch of numbers and stuff, MR Source 0, which is the right controller. I believe the left controller is MR Source 1. And then I selected my index controller. You can double check your work here by pressing Identify Selected Devices, and you'll feel the controllers that you're going to use vibrating. Now you can choose a calibration speed. Slower means that it takes longer, but collects more data points, which is good. But honestly, I found fast still to be really, really good. You can experiment though on your own with different calibrations. Before starting the calibration, be sure that you hold your controllers fixed relative to each other. So I recommend trying, if you can, to hold them in one hand. You can hold the index controller upside down if you want, if that helps you grip it. The key is that both your controllers need to move together perfectly. They need to be fixed relative to each other during this whole calibration. And you're going to be moving them around a bunch once the calibration starts, so be sure you have a good grip. You can use two hands if you need to as well. Then you're going to start the calibration and move the controllers together to cover different XYZ coordinates and different pitch, whirl, yaw values. A figure 8 pattern is a very efficient way to do this, so you can see me kind of doing it here, just waving around in a large figure 8 motion. Be sure to maintain solid tracking during all of this. This is very important. Do not wave around wildly. Make sure you keep your G2 controller in view of the cameras, and don't occlude the index controller tracking ring from the base stations. And that's it. Suddenly, yay, we've got it. We did our calibration. Now we have a index controller here right in front of us. And actually this finalizes all of your calibrations. Any device now you add in from Steam VR, be it your other index controller or Vive trackers or whatever, will all be synchronized properly. So now that we're done, we can click close here, and you can click copy chaperone bounds to profile. If you want, you can also tweak the calibration. So by clicking on edit calibration, you can tweak some of the numbers here. I recommend, if you want to do this, only do it for very small tweaks in X, Y, or Z. Otherwise, I would just redo a calibration if something's off. And in general, I would just recommend doing the calibration again if there's any issue. So now that we're done, exit Steam VR. So go ahead and exit Steam VR. Your index controllers should turn off. And then what you're going to do is turn off your G2 controllers or your Oculus Touch controllers or whatever controllers you're using. Then once everything's off, turn on your index controllers, and this should launch Steam VR. And then you'll enter Steam VR with both of your index controllers, and those just will be your controllers. There you go, you've done it. And you have full functionality. Your index controllers have, all of the finger tracking and full base station tracking. And that's really it. So that's really all that's needed for the tutorial. So if that's all you were here for, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you found the video useful, of course. But if you're sticking around, this is not really the end of the story. So there is other software. There's Chaperone software, which I will also put in the description. And you can find this software on Steam. So this is OVR Advanced Settings. If you launch this while you're in Steam VR, then it will appear alongside your overlays, just like OpenVR Space Calibrator. And there's plenty of tutorials out there on how to use this software, as well as some really good tips by Pumpkin Spice Trucknuts, again, in the description. If you read through the text version of this tutorial at the end, there is some tips on using this software. And that will allow you to kind of manipulate the chaperone boundaries, because you're dealing with both Windows Mixed Reality and Steam VR chaperone boundaries. And then in addition, you might also be interested in looking into controlling your base stations remotely, right? So by default, you know, they're going to be plugged in and running all of the time. But if you had an Index or a Vive, you would be able to turn them off in your Steam VR settings. And so if you want to be able to do that with this setup, you're going to have to use something called Mixed VR Manager, which is made by Monster Mac. So again, I will put another link in the description for that. If you're interested in these types of additional enhancements to this setup, then yeah, you can feel free to look into those. Like I said with this video, I really just wanted to make sure there's, you know, a nice tutorial video, accurate, and then we can discuss in my upcoming video more about the actual value of the setup, right? Like how well does this work? How well does the tracking work? All of those kinds of things. You know, for the most part, it works really, really well. This is my sneak preview of it. But there are a couple things that I do want to point out with it. And, you know, the main reason I wanted to post that is just because there's really not many reviews of this setup on YouTube, like at all, which is very surprising considering the number of mentions of using the Index controllers with the G2 there are in all of the G2 reviews. You know, if you look at the G2 reviews, basically every YouTuber says, oh, and you know, if you don't like the controllers and the tracking, you could probably use, you know, Index controllers. And I'm very surprised that there's not more like in-depth reviews on the actual setup, because it is unique. So yeah, anyway, as usual, thanks for watching. I'll cover all of that in my upcoming video. Have a good one.